After confusion earlier this week, the U.S. is now clarifying a key detail in its new auto tariffs. Parts made in Canada and Mexico will be spared as long as they meet the rules of CUSMA. For more on this, let's go to our business reporter, Nisha Patel. Nisha, take us through the latest on this.
Sarah, a new U.S. tariff on foreign auto imports is set to take effect on Saturday, but U.S. Customs and Border Protection has just released some new paperwork, and they are confirming that Canadian auto parts that are compliant under CUSMA, the North American Free Trade Deal, are exempt. So after weeks of lobbying, a little bit of relief for auto sector in Canada. But we also learned this week that automakers can get a lower rate on duties if the car is built in the U.S. And while there's still a 25% tariff on cars themselves, as well as on steel and aluminum, there was a big policy reversal, and that means that those tariffs will not be stacked, that companies won't have to pay them one on top of the other. So while there has been some kind of walking back of the tariff policy from the United States, there is still a lot of uncertainty for the industry. Take a listen.
Companies are anxious. They're trying to figure out the matrix of these measures, both threatened and imposed, and whether that profitability is their profitability is going to be eroded in the short term or the long term. They're worried about being the ones to shut down first.
Companies are warning that even reduced tariffs will slow sales, will increase costs, and could cause job losses. One analyst looking at the measures today said that these reliefs are like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, Sarah.
Nisha, regardless of whether the tariffs take effect are softened, the lead up to this, there's been so much uncertainty. What are some of the impacts that we're seeing as a result of it all?
Well, they're really, driving away business and really hampering investment. Just today, General Motors said it expects to take as much as a $5 billion hit this year because of tariffs. We have seen some assembly plants in Canada pausing. Stellantis today saying that next week it will pause production at one of its assembly plants. Stellantis also saying that it plans to move some Mexican production to Michigan as it tries to avoid these tariffs. And that really has been the motivation for Donald Trump. He is trying to get companies to shift production from overseas or from Canada and Mexico back to the United States. That could, analysts say, take years and billions of dollars, but that's what he's trying to do. It's a major concern for Canada's auto sector. So industry leaders say that if the U.S. does want to renegotiate our trade terms, then we need to get to a negotiating table fast.
Thanks, Nisha.
You bet.
Okay, we want to get some reaction to this story. Hugh Williams, the national spokesperson for the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association, representing auto and truck dealers across Canada. He joins us from Cancun, Mexico, where he's at an auto conference. Good to speak with you, Hugh.
Good to speak to you, too. I mean, obviously, when you're at an auto conference and there's folks internationally here, tariffs are definitely the buzzword. And our dealers across Canada, we employ 175,000 Canadians. They've been very worried about the impacts of the tariffs. And today's announcement is good news for engagement, good news for the fact that we've moved the needle on a very important element of the disagreements between the two countries.
Just set this up for me. You're at this conference. This news, trickles out, hits the wires. And how fast does it make its way throughout the crowds at that conference?
Well, it's interesting. I was presenting at the conference earlier in the week, and one of the things you always worry about is that while you're up presenting on stage, you're going to be upstaged by an announcement from the White House. I think that people are really tuned into this from an economic point of view. It's not just the car industry, but there's no sector that's more engaged on this than the car industry. At the end of the day, we have a highly integrated industry that is, and it's tough for people outside the industry to imagine how many times different parts cross the border. And what we want to have is one unified auto sector. And the U.S. has been slow to understand how highly integrated it is. So when the White House announced these tariffs originally, they really didn't have a fundamental understanding of how the auto sector worked.
Do you see this, what's happened here from the White House, as, I guess, I'm going to say yet another retreat in terms of the threat of tariffs? And what does that say to you and your colleagues about the strategy here of the U.S.?
What I'm not sure it's possible to unpack what the strategy is from the U.S. and even from U.S. dealers that I'm talking to here. They are confounded by the nature of the approach coming out of the White House. I think what's important, though, is that this is a victory for positive engagement. We've seen Premier Ford, he went down, spoke with Secretary of Commerce Lutnick. That was really the beginning of a series of engagement to make sure that the auto industry in the States was delivering a message of how important Canada was to the supply chain and the profitability of those companies, and ultimately to the American consumers. Our message with our counterpart dealers in the States is that these tariffs are bad for the economies in both countries. They're certainly bad for dealers in both countries and the auto industry, and ultimately bad for consumers. So this is a recognition that positive engagement can work and we can get to move forward. I think long term we need some elements to bring us together to the negotiating table to avoid these kind of fits and starts that we've seen over the last little while. But again, a positive day for both the Carney administration and the Ford administration who worked really hard on this with industry. And I can't say enough about how great they've been to work with.
I mean, and maybe that message has gone through, and maybe that is what has transpired here and that we're seeing the results of. Trump has said that he wants domestic production, that's the whole reason for in bringing in at least certainly the auto tariffs. Is that possibly happening here? Are you seeing any result of that, or is there already a chill within global players? I mean, is there any production moving to the United States?
Yeah, I think that's part of the misunderstanding within the Trump administration, that you can't just move production around at a whim. I mean, these are huge investments that take a long time to set up, and you also need educated workforces in the right place at the right time. Canada has significant advantages in terms of our cost structure, in terms of our ability to have an educated workforce and deliver to the automotive supply chain, which again is really integrated between the countries. And the important thing about the supply chain here in North America, it allows American companies and those producing in Canada and the U.S. to be competitive against the world. And that was the whole design of the USMCA or CUSMA, to have a forceful economic force united of the three countries in the auto sector. And unpacking that based on some misdirected political opinions that don't really understand that is tremendously damaging. And I will say that our U.S. counterparts have really stepped up their engagement in the U.S. and brought the administration along to understand exactly what they were destroying in the U.S. and Canada. And so we take today as a positive engagement, positive for consumers on both sides of the border. There's definitely more work to be done, but I'm very, very happy. In particular, the Ontario office of the Premier down in Washington, housed at the embassy, has done a fantastic job. David Patterson, who's a former automotive executive himself, who was put in that position by Premier Ford, has kept us in the loop, has worked with us. We've worked with our American colleagues. I want to thank them for their work on this. More to do, but definitely a good day.
Well, Hugh, thanks for that, and enjoy your time in Cancun. That's Hugh Williams, national spokesperson for the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association.